Hello, I'm Helen, this is Mary, and our topic is whether or not anesthesia is neurotoxic in fetus, infant, and child. Now, over the years, the idea of anesthesia being neurotoxic has existed, but there has not been evidence, and lately, depending on animal studies, they found out that, in fact, some neuronal changes might be caused in developing mammalian brain, and these studies have been conducted over the course of the last 15 years. So based on this, a lot of retrospective studies have followed in infants and young children. So during this presentation, we're going to first briefly summarize rapid brain growth and development and how anesthesia actually affects the brain. And then we're going to talk about what kind of animal studies have been conducted about this topic. Then what kind of human studies have followed this. And lastly, we're going to discuss this metatomic because it has been proposed as a potential neuroprotector against anesthetic toxicity. So fetal brain growth has different phases. First is neurogenesis, migration, neuroapoptosis, synaptogenesis, pruning, and myelination. Neurogenesis starts briefly after gestation. After that follows migration, which is from 12 to 20 weeks of gestation. After that, there is neuroapoptosis, which starts at 24 weeks and it ends at 4 weeks after birth. Then there is synapses, and synapses start during 20 weeks of gestation, and it actually peaks at 1 and 2 years of age. And if we compare this child to an adult person, we're going to find out that they have at least twice more synapses than an adult person. After that, there is pruning, and during pruning, we're losing some parts of synapses, and then there is myelination, and during myelination, it starts in second trimester, and it gradually and slowly goes throughout whole childhood. Then what do we know about what kind of effect does anesthetics have on developing brain? And we know that their main site of action is GABA and NMDA receptors, and they interfere with activity-dependent network formation. Now, what that means is GABA and NMDA receptors indirectly regulate immature calcium channels, and that triggers unwanted apoptosis, and this unwanted apoptosis means that we are losing cells that we actually need, and it might cause to multiple complications like suppression of neurogenesis, morphologically abnormal synapse formation, altered dendritic synaptogenesis, impairment of hippocampal long-term potentiation, deformation of glial cytoskeletal action, and impairment in mitochondrial function. Now, there have been several animal studies conducted about this topic, and the first one was in 1991, and it was done by Dr. Ikanomiro and his colleagues, and they researched neonatal rats, and they were exposing these rats to ketamine, and what they found out was that it was at least 50 to 20-fold increase in unwanted neuroapoptosis in different brain regions. Second study that followed was done in 2003, and it was done in Dr. Todorovic and his colleagues, also in neonatal rats, and they were exposing these rats to 3 different substances: nitrous oxide, isoflurane, and midazolam, and they were exposing them for at least 6 hours. And after that, they found out that it was at least 20 to 60-fold increase in unwanted neuroapoptosis in developing neonatal rat brains. So in the end, there was a study done in 2005, and it was done by Dr. Coleman, and they were researching neonatal rhesus macaques, and they were exposing them to isoflurane. But what they did differently this time was that they were exposing them either for 1 time or 3 times, because they wanted to see the comparison between the two. So when they cross-matched the 3-time exposed monkeys to a control animal, they found out that these monkeys had decreased motor reflexes, and they were extremely anxious, and the animals who were exposed only once, when they didn't show this kind of changes at all. So that's very extreme.
So thank you, Helen. We still have to answer the main question: is anesthesia neurotoxic to infants and children? So everything started back in 2009 when Dr. Wilder and his colleagues published the first large-scale retrospective study about anesthesia exposure under 4 years of age. And they assessed the behavioral, learning, and developmental problems in these children, and they discovered that there was, under repeated and prolonged exposure to anesthesia, there was actually a twofold increase in these problems compared to subjects who were not exposed to anesthesia. After 2009, there was a lot of other retrospective studies done that showed mixed results regarding this topic, but there was 2 clinical studies who were higher design studies, and one of them was general anesthesia versus spinal anesthesia and pediatric anesthesia neurodevelopmental assessment. So these studies are important because they give us critical new information. So what happened in GAS was that they enrolled 722 patients, and their age was postnatal age of 60 weeks or less. And they underwent inguinal hernia repair. They were randomized at general anesthesia with isoflurane and regional anesthesia with bupivacaine. And the exposure time was 54 minutes. What they did, that they assessed primary and secondary outcomes after this, but there was not much difference. And then the PANDA study is important as well because they had sibling pairs, 155 of them, and they also one of the siblings underwent inguinal hernia repair, and the duration time was 84 minutes, and the other pair was not exposed to anesthesia. And they, after 8 to 15 years, they came back. After they turned 8 to 15 years, they came back, and their neurocognitive tests was done, and the IQ scores were identical, and the secondary tests, language, attention, and executive function were also not different. And this innovative study is very important because it minimizes the genetic and socioeconomic differences between these groups. So based on these studies, both of them are very important because they give us the idea that brief exposure to anesthesia doesn't really give us any neurotoxic effects. So it is important for studies to shift more toward prolonged repeated exposures or exposure of anesthesia in vulnerable brains, and ICU infants also need to be assessed. So let's say that according to this studies, the answer to our question is yes, maybe anesthesia does place a rapidly developing fetal brain under the risk of having some kind of neurodegenerative injuries. So how can we change this? How can we protect it? There is this agent called dexmedetomidine, and it is an adrenergic agent that works on CNS alpha-2 receptors, and it is highly selective agonist, and it causes hypnosis and anxiolysis as well as an analgesis by binding to this receptor. So this drug is FDA approved. It is it was first approved in 1999. It is used in ICU sedative as a sedative agent in ventilated adults, and in 2007 it was approved in procedural sedation as well. But we should point that FDA did not approve it in children in under 18 years. So that's there are ongoing studies about dexmedetomidine to be used in children as well. And in 2009, Dr. Sanders decided to conduct a study on animals. He chose neonatal rats, and they were exposed primarily to dexmedetomidine just to see if it would cause any kind of neuroapoptotic effects in them. But there was no changes. It was close to the baseline neuroapoptosis. It was not changed. And then they chose another group and exposed them to isoflurane, and what they found that there was strong increase in neuroapoptosis, and the mean exposure time was 6 hours. And then they decided to add isoflurane to dexmedetomidine and see if that would change anything. And they found out that there was actually dose-dependent change in neuroapoptosis and the injury. So after this publication, there was a lot of other studies done that showed the same kind of results, and by that we can assume that dexmedetomidine actually has neuroprotectant. I also forgot that the neonates, they were assessed after, and their memory and orientation, it was intact. So this means that dexmedetomidine indeed protects the nervous system, and it does not cause any neurodegenerative and later neurobehavioral changes. And I'll just add this. So since we know like the coin has two sides, right? So this the agent also has some kind of bad effect. Is that Dr. Pankara conducted a study where he decided to see if dose change would have any effects. And he, at very high doses, he discovered that it actually caused neuroapoptosis as well. And I just want to summarize everything and say that we don't have enough evidence to answer our question that there is any kind of neurotoxicity, but I think there is enough evidence for us to continue research and do better.